one of the things that historians will note about Britain is that in many times down through the ages, Britain has slipped into a dangerous position. Any number of factors have contributed to that, but pulled themselves back from the brink by what might be called their pluckiness and resolve when the going gets tough. Can a modern Britain that's so used to relying on government playing God, looking after their every need, responding to every clamour for more welfare, and now I would argue deeply fragmented and divided, not least of all because of the immigration policies themselves, bringing so many people who have no attachment to British culture.
Mm.
Are the British people up for the disciplines? Because they will be very real, needed to restore the economy and put the country on a better trajectory?
Well, there's an old saying, isn't there, that the Brits lose every battle except the last one. And I think I'm an optimist, John. I'm not a pessimist. I think it's very easy to look around and think, well, the state policy of multiculturalism is clearly failing. We have some pretty worrying surveys that suggest a significant share of Gen Z would not fight for the country and believe that Britain is a racist society. You've got a political leadership that's no longer really interested in the principle of national preference, in putting its own people first, that can't even be bothered to hold a national inquiry into the assault and rape of its own children. There are lots of reasons to be gloomy and pessimistic about Britain. But I'm a big believer in popular sovereignty. And I would just point to a couple of things that give me some quiet confidence. The first is Brexit. You know, if you go back just a few years, it was the principle of popular sovereignty that got Brexit over the line when much of the elite class didn't want to do it. You know, the moment that referendum was put onto the table, the people voted to push their country in a very different direction. And when over the next few years, the ruling class did everything they could to dilute it, stop it and soften it, the people said no, and they powered Boris Johnson into number 10. I have a firm, unwavering belief in the power and capacity of the English people and the British people to correct the system when the system is no longer working for them. I also think we can now see the beginnings of that change, not only in the rise of Reform and Nigel Farage, which is the most significant political insurgency, as I say, since the rise of the Labour Party in the early 20th century. Politics is being transformed by the people who are pushing that party forward. But you can also see it reflected in the changing positions of the mainstream parties, who have now realized that they have moved so far to the cultural left, especially on issues like migration and borders, that they are simply no longer in touch with the average voter. And as a consequence, you know, they may not survive as viable political organizations. We are witnessing the death of the Tory party, one of the oldest, most successful political parties in the history of democracy. As you and I speak today, is polling 17% in the national polls, 1-7. The pollsters would never, ever have believed that the Conservative Party could plummet to those lows. And I don't think that's the flaw, by the way. I think they will continue to decline. So we are seeing the system beginning to correct itself. And even if I don't believe Keir Starmer and the Labour Party for a second when it comes to the issues of migration, they are already using the language, the discourse, the vibes that conservatives and conservative-minded people have been pushing through. And if you believe that idea that politics now is more about the vibes than necessarily the sort of, you know, the old left-right debate, then, you know, I would say we're winning. People like me, people who care about, you know, reasserting our national values, pushing back against this elite experiment, we're winning the argument. Globally, I would also say, I think there are lots of signs that we're winning. Look at what's happening in Germany. Look at what's happening in Sweden. Look at what's happening in Italy. Look at what's happening in America. I think we are actually beginning to see quite a sustained pushback against the liberal excesses of the 1990s, 2000s and 2010s. And I think, you know, there are obviously always exceptions. You know, the election results in some countries don't always reinforce that. But I think there are lots of reasons to be optimistic about the direction of travel.